want us to go into the achieve area and more looking at sensory processing disorder.
Yeah.
And to start that conversation, a lot of parents might think that, yes, we have 5 senses, but you are actually saying, no, we actually have 8 senses. I want us, before we get into the detail of sensory processing disorder, explain to parents the 8 senses. So we have the additional 3. So everybody knows about the 5. So what are the
Yeah.
additional 3 senses? And then we can look into how these senses tie into any form of sensory processing disorder.
Okay, so we know you've got your taste, your smell, your touch, your hearing, and your vision, but then we have three other senses. So you've got what we call proprioception, which is really your body awareness. It's knowing it. We're looking at our muscles, our joints, and knowing where your body is in space. And it's what allows me to be looking up over there, but know that my coffee cup is over there, pick it up and know how full it is. So how much pressure or effort I need to do to lift it up. So am I going to lift it up wildly because I think there's lots of coffee in it or not? It's also what allows me to be able to look over there, take the coffee cup and bring it to my mouth without spilling and putting it down again in place. So it's that body awareness. Your proprioceptors are located in all your joints, and it's an active process. So every time you activate your proprioceptors is when you get that sense of where your body is in space. Your next sense is your vestibular system, and that is your sense of movement. So you can see I'm constantly moving. Your vestibular apparatus, as they call it, is located in your inner ear. And what happens is in your inner ear, you have fluids. You've got tiny hairs, and the fluids will go over over the little hairs, depending on where your head is. So if you're rocking a baby very slowly from side to side, the fluids are going over, they're sending a very calming, relaxing message. And so you just soothe and you calm, and sometimes the baby is really taken from you, but you're still kind of just rocking, and that happens a lot, right? When you have the abrupt stop-start movements, when you are spinning, the message that gets sent, so to speak, to the brain is that you need to be on high alert. So that will increase our alertness and our arousal levels. And then we have our last sense, which is called interoception. So that's all your internal workings that it lets you know when you need the bathroom, what you need to go to the bathroom for, if you're hungry or if you're thirsty. So that's that 8th sense. The 3 kind of key players that I tend to focus on in sessions, or that we have a lot of difficulties with, is your vestibular, your proprioceptive, and your tactile systems. They work together quite beautifully to have you be more regulated and more organized.
And let's look at the proprioceptive system. Yeah. So when that is not working well in our children, what does that look like? Because I think this term or this sense might be quite novel to a lot of parents. And so they might be wondering, what's that? And what happens when it doesn't work properly? So can you tell us when it doesn't work properly, what it looks like, and to help to develop the system, what we as parents can do?
Okay. So when you see an adult or a child, and let's stick with kids for now, when you see a child who is constantly fidgeting, so they cannot sit still, they are, just they can't physically sit still. These are the kids who maybe will be biting their nails, or biting their nails, or they'll be chewing a pen. I have a lot of parents who say my child is constantly chewing his sleeve, the inside of his sleeves or his collars. These are the kids who use a lot of force. So when they're writing, for example, then I tear the paper. You can see white fingertips because they're putting on so much pressure, which then leads to handache. or the kids who hold things so loosely that they can't use them effectively, right? So they do the very light spidery writing. The kids who will constantly, they can't just walk anywhere. They'll be bouncing or they'll be stomping. They slam doors. They don't necessarily realize that they are slamming the door, but they're using so much force all the time that that's where they're struggling with that modulation and that graduation of force. So that's that whole proprioceptive. So they can't still. They are just constantly fidgeting, and they're doing this in order to get more feedback about where their bodies are in space, and so that they can regulate and be more alert. And one of the biggest things that you'll hear or that you'll read about is what we call heavy work. So heavy work is your pushing, your pulling, um, getting that real deep active muscle work. So getting your kids to dig or to help you pull out the wet washing out of the washing machine. So getting that muscle activation. Having your kids help you vacuum or sweep or dig in the garden to get all of that input and feedback to their muscles. Anything that they're doing against resistance work is going to be really good for activating that proprioceptive system. And yeah, just kind of things that they can do.
I'm happy you mentioned that because I've communicated with parents as well who have that concern. My child can't stand still in the line at school. My child is unable to sit still in the classroom and has to be up and about and jumping around.
Yeah.
So even teachers listening to this interview can then say, oh, maybe that's what is happening. I can have this child help me to move the heavy books or things
Absolutely.
down. Right.
Yeah. So we'll often have, the kids who, so in class, we'll give little wobble cushions, little air cushions for kids to sit on because they get extra movement. We have standing desks, which, not the really expensive ones. We just use the little laptop desks, and we have them around the class so that all the kids have access to them, because we don't want to alienate a child and say, oh, only you need this. Because actually, we all have sensory needs. We all need to move. I mean, I cannot sit still. And cognitively, if you say to that child, sit still, you might have a child who's so compliant, who's trying to be so good, that all their energy is going to go on sitting still. And that means that they're not going to be taking in anything that the teacher is saying or anything that's going on around them. And what's really fascinating is, so my kids, for example, used to be hanging upside down or jumping or running while learning, for example, times tables or telling me a story. And this happens in class. The child is constantly moving. It might annoy the teacher because, she might have her own visual difficulties with seeing a child move in the corner of her eye. But when you say, right, so who can tell me what happened in the story? The child who was moving might be lying on the floor and his hand will go up and he will be able to say exactly what happened. And, quite often they'll have picked up things that you wouldn't have thought they would have, because all you're seeing is a child who's moving, a child who can't possibly be concentrating, but actually that's how they concentrate, that's how they regulate and are able to take in all of that information. So yeah, it's really important to say, okay, you can help me take the books, you can be in the whiteboard for me. There's all of that feedback. If I've now, in COVID times, I've disinfected the desks, you can come afterwards with a dry towel and clean it all off. Stacking the chairs, moving tables, it's all of those things which don't do them yourself, ask the kids to help you.
I like what you said with how the child might be bouncing around the classroom and then the teacher might ask a question and realize that they're actually paying attention. Because as you said that, I'm thinking about some parents who are used to their system is you sit quietly, you do your homework. And that's how you are supposed to be able to concentrate. But you might have a child who finds it difficult to do that, but they may need to move around the room to get their homework completed. And it's just to have that awareness that you might need to check is if the child is actually understanding and completing the homework while they're moving around. And if that works for the child, go ahead and allow that instead of insisting that the child sits quietly, and might be sitting quietly worked for you, but not necessarily for your child.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you might have three kids. Two of them might sit beautifully when they're learning, and one of them might not. And there are every class, there might not have any diagnosis, but every class, I'd say 10%, if not more, yeah, probably a lot more, have these fidgeters, have these kids who move to learn. And that should be allowed, right? Because it's in the times that we're in, it's not just about that traditional learning. Sitting on a ball chair, for example, I did most of last year, my first few Zoom months on Zoom, sitting on an exercise ball, those big inflatable exercise balls. And that was amazing for me because it kept me regulated throughout the day. Yeah.